Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
It's our culture unit, and we're starting off by talking about some Chinese expressions that are untranslatable in English. As an English teacher, I've heard students ask me, "Oh, teacher, how do you say this in English?" Well, yeah, I don't really know. We don't really have a direct translation for that. We kind of have to use different terms and things like that. So that's what we're talking about today. Untranslatable Chinese expressions.
We run into these a lot, actually, because of the work we do. A lot of scripts I'm given to dub, to paying, to dub, have kind of crazy translations. And so I've been asking them to give me the Chinese, and I can see what they have and then try to come up with something that's a little closer. I have a phrase for this. It's like 翻译过来. You just take the Chinese and you move it directly into English, and it doesn't work sometimes. Another one of these untranslatable, I think, Chinese expressions is 过分. We use 过分 so much for so many things, and you can't automatically use it for every situation that you do in Taiwan. So it's good to know about some tricky, untranslatable words and how to deal with them if you come up against them.
This does work in reverse as well. There are some English terms that are difficult to translate into Chinese. So it's all a process when you're learning another language, but you do have to accept this. Sometimes there just isn't a way to translate something directly.
Right.
You have to 拐弯抹角, as you say in Chinese, beat around the bush and figure out a way to express something using different terms. So let's get to it, everybody. Let's read through the entire contents of our lesson now one time. Translation can be a tricky business. Some words and expressions have a clear equivalent in another language, but others just don't translate easily. Here are a few Chinese ones with cultural connotations that make them hard to express simply in English. 加油. Literally, this means add oil, but this phrase is frequently used as encouragement. Depending on the context, the expression can also be used to cheer people up after a disappointment or wish people good luck. In English, each of these situations has its own sayings. 孝顺. Your parents approve of this phrase. The plain translation is simply filial, but the term carries so much more meaning in Chinese culture. It encompasses showing respect to one's parents as well as treating them in a manner consistent with society's expectations. Children are expected to listen to their parents, obey their instructions, and spend plenty of time with them. Expressing the same concept in English takes a lot more words. 辛苦. There are multiple uses for this term, so let's discover what it means. It roughly translates as laborious, but that doesn't tell the whole story. The term is used to show gratitude to people for their efforts on your behalf, as well as to express sympathy for people dealing with hard times. It can also be used to request a favor. This is definitely one hard-working expression. Okay, it's time for us to discuss the contents of today's lesson. Again, we're asking this question, but what does it really mean? Okay, we know what it means, but what exactly is the meaning? And we are talking about untranslatable Chinese expressions. To translate means to convert something from one language into another. And a translation is the act of doing this. I work in translation, I'm a translator, etc. But if something is untranslatable, it's just very difficult to convey that term in another language.
Yeah, really, really tough sometimes. So it can be tricky. If something's tricky, it's just kind of difficult to deal with or do. Maybe it's really complicated, or maybe you have to be very sensitive to what's going on around a particular situation. So lots of things can be tricky. Just a really easy one is, I know some of my exercise videos suggest walking backwards is really good for you, especially as you start getting older. And I would say that walking backward instead of forward is tricky. Going forward's pretty easy. But even driving backward or backwards, they're both okay, is kind of tricky, kind of hard, difficult to do. And translation can be a tricky business.
And some words and expressions have a clear equivalent in another language, but others just don't translate easily.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, indeed, some terms can be translated directly. There's no problem. North is bay in Chinese. That's direct, right? So that's pretty clear there. But others, of course, do not translate easily. And we've got a couple of examples today. Here are a few Chinese ones with cultural connotations that make them hard to express simply in English. And if you have a connotation, that just means it's a special kind of definition or it provokes a certain kind of reaction from people. So yes, indeed, it's a meaning, but it also has additional detailed meanings that you need to know about.
Yeah, connotation gives you that idea that you have to look at the situation or the whole sentence and not just one word. I find that a lot of the problems with translations I get is they're looking up direct translations for a word when in truth, in English, we're using something completely different to describe that particular situation. So the connotation is something, it's the quality or an idea behind a word that makes it more than just its basic meaning. So yeah, look at the cultural connotations. For example, talking about a broken clock doesn't mean anything to Americans or even to Brits. But when you talk about broken clocks in Taiwan, something completely different. So you have to be aware of a country's culture if you're really going to be a very good translator. And we have some good ones here in Taiwan, I must say, who either translate from Chinese to English or English to Chinese. There's some really great translators. But I think it's an industry or at least a profession that you'll be learning your whole life. You'll never be finished learning because nowadays we also have slang that we have to deal with.
Okay, and the first term we're going to talk about today is 加油, and literally this means add oil. That's the direct translation of this term, add oil, 加油, but this phrase is frequently used in different situations. It's used as encouragement, especially if somebody's trying to do something. They're trying to run in a race, for example, and you can be shouting from the stands, 加油, 加油, which, of course, you cannot directly say, add oil, add oil. That just sounds really weird. I guess you just have to say, go, go, try harder, do your best.
Yeah, one of the things that the foreigners here in Taiwan joke about is this particular phrase. But instead of saying add oil, Tom, we usually say add gas because it's kind of funny because if you expel gas or let gas out, it's that's farting, which is, 放屁, which is not nice. So just as a joke, we'll sometimes say, hey, add gas. But you can't literally translate this. Literally means the exact meaning of the words. So like Tom said, what do you say when you're trying to cheer someone on? If I'm watching a game, I'd probably go, go, run, faster, go. But it's usually just go. Ours is kind of boring, I guess. Depending on the context here is a situation. The expression can also be used to cheer people up after a disappointment. Cheer up. But we would never say, go to cheer someone up either. So this is one of those phrases that you can use in different ways if you're here in Taiwan, but not so much in America. Because if someone's down and depressed after a disappointment in America, we would probably say, cheer up. I hope you feel better. It's not over. You'll have more chances. So it's a phrase you use to wish people luck. But again, in English, each of these situations has its own sayings. And you know what? Its own sayings that applies to Chinese as well. Sometimes we use a phrase in several situations, whereas in Chinese, you have different sayings for each specific situation. It gets kind of tricky that way, but it's always fun.
Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but yes, indeed, there are some phrases in English that need to be expressed in different ways, in different situations in Chinese. You'll learn those terms as your journey of learning English continues over the years. And yes, indeed, 加油 also means to get gasoline. I need to get gasoline for my car. I need to fill up my tank. Usually in America, we just say, oh, I need to get some gas. We need to get some gas or almost out, we're on empty, or we're running on empty.
We're running low.
Running low, etc. And the next term here is 孝顺. Okay, 孝顺. Okay, that's a difficult concept. We know what it means once it's explained to us, but your parents approve of this phrase. So to approve of something means that you like this thing, you're not against it. When somebody has this idea, you approve of it, you really like it, you support it.
Yeah, so it's what is it? 孝顺. I don't use that much, but yeah, your parents approve of this phrase. So the plain translation is simply filial or filial piety. You'll often see if you're reading a novel or watching a TV show about history. But the term carries so much more meaning in Chinese culture. It encompasses or includes. To encompass just means it has different feeling around it too. To encompass is to surround. So it encompasses showing respect to one's parents as well as treating them in a manner consistent with society's expectations. And of course, the Chinese family is so close and important that your expectations are different than what American parents or British parents would have for their own kids. Your expectations are kind of your hope of what might take place in the future. And if you're talking about filial, it just means it's a relationship between a son or a daughter to their parents. So a child's filial duty is to care for their elderly parents as they get older. I think that's true, though, in Western culture, too. We feel obligated, especially if we have good parents, to take care of them as they get older, like they took care of us when we were young.
Right. This term does have a direct English translation, filial or filial piety, but if you say this in a conversation, oh, my son is not filial at all, someone's going to wonder what the heck you're talking about.
Won't know.
Because it's just not commonly used, but the concept is there. I have a son who's just very disloyal. He's not taking care of me very well. And so we do have the concept, but we just don't use the term in the same way. And it encompasses showing respect to one's parents as well as treating them in a manner consistent, again, with society's expectations. So it encompasses or includes all these things. And children are expected to listen to their parents, obey their instructions, and spend plenty of time with them. And expressing the same concept in English takes a lot more words, as I already said. So again, children are expected to perform certain roles for their parents. You're supposed to listen to them. You're supposed to obey their instructions. And also, when your parents get older, you're supposed to spend plenty of time with them. Although it seems to me lots of young people want to live on their own these days, but they still get together with their parents once in a while. We don't really have the extended family so much anymore. It's more of a nuclear family here in Taiwan. At least it's getting that way, at least in my opinion. And but still, the kids, after they're married out, they still get together with mom and dad every so often and have a meal or have a lot of fun.
Okay, guys, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back to continue talking about this particular tricky situation of untranslatable Chinese expressions.
Hello everyone, 我是派老师。今天讲解的是寒假合刊 Unit 1. But what does it really mean? Untranslatable Chinese expressions. 这个单元介绍中文绘画里面3个常见的词语，分别是加油、孝顺和辛苦。大家可能会觉得纳闷，这本杂志不是英语学习杂志吗？怎么教起中文了？其实多数听众生活受教育的语言是华语，有可能会遇到在台湾学习华语的外国友人，我们都把华语当作理所当然，可是外国人对我们提出问题的时候，大家是否知道该怎么解答呢？这个单元整理了3个词语，很难在英文里面找出单一对应的词语。好，那我们一起来看学习重点吧。 请同学先看到第一段。第一段先做一个总的介绍。Translation can be a tricky business. 请同学看到 tricky 这个单字 ，tricky 的意思是有点麻烦的、棘手的意思呢，就是翻译有时候是挺棘手的一件事。好，那我们通常呢都会在不同的语言里面，希望能够找到对应。好，所以请同学看到第二个句子 ，equivalent 这个字就是对应的意思。好，再来我们看到 but 后面的这个部分，动词 translate。老师要提醒大家的是，这个字呢，我们通常都会说把什么东西翻译成另外一个语言，像比方说把这个文件翻译成英文 ，translate this document into English。那但是这里的 translate 它其实呢是当作不及物动词来用，这也是可以接受的。好，那再来我们往下看，看到第一个词语要讲的就是加油。好，那加油呢，绝对我们在讲英文的时候，字面上不会说 add oil， 那这只是它表面上的意思。加油两个字字面上的意思是 add oil， 可是我们英文当中并不会这么说。那而且呢，其实中文讲加油的时候，看上下文情况也不太一样，所以我们看到第二个句子 depending on the context， 所以要看上下文而定。加油这句话呢，有时候是帮别人打气 to cheer people up， 那有时候呢是祝别人好运 to wish them good luck。再来，我们看到第二个词语是孝顺，请同学先看到第一个句子 Your parents approve of this phrase. Approve of 后面如果加上 of 的时候呢，请同学要特别注意，这边并不是批准的意思，而是赞成、赞同。那你的爸爸妈妈听到孝顺这两个字，他们应该都是会认同、会赞同的。好，我们看到呢，就是孝顺在中文当中呢，其实有相当丰富的意涵。It carries so much more meaning in Chinese culture。那孝顺这两个字当中，在说华语的文化里面呢，其实意涵相当的丰富。动词呢，请同学特别注意 carries， 就这个字呢，它其实包含了非常多的意涵。老师刚刚讲到包含，其实一个非常常见的动词就是下面这个第三个句子的 it encompasses， 这里的 encompass 就包含了哪些呢？包括对自己的父母表示尊敬、敬重，showing respect to one's parents。 此外呢，当然在对待父母的时候，符合社会的期望，这也是一种孝顺的表现 in a manner consistent with society's expectations。 所以这里 be consistent with 也就是符合一致的意思。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. It's our culture unit, and we're talking about something very fun, I think, and that's untranslatable Chinese expressions. So there are a lot of Chinese expressions that if we translate them directly or literally, it makes no sense. And it's definitely weird to foreigners' ears if we try to do that. So sometimes in translation, you have to come up with a phrase that has the same feeling and meaning with different words. I remember one time, it was a while ago, I was asked to translate a 30-second ad or advertisement for 7-Eleven. And it was beautiful Chinese. It was a Chinese poem. And it just didn't work in English. It sounded silly. Because, we don't talk like that. And it was very poetic. And so foreigners would not understand that. So I asked the client if I could just come up with something similar that would be acceptable or cooler to us in English. And that's what we did. I actually didn't translate it word for word at all, but had something that had kind of the same feeling to it, but just didn't sound like poetry, because we don't think of 7-Eleven or convenience stores as, elegant stores. They're just quick places to pick up something that's kind of cheap. So translation can be a tricky business, and the best translators I know here in Taiwan are the ones that can look at a situation and just come up with something similar in English that works even better.
Right. There are different ways to translate. Of course, you can translate directly, or you can try to interpret something so that it actually sounds good in the new language. And remember, in the first part of our lesson, we talked about a couple of terms here. We talked about 加油, which means to add oil, literally, but we use it as encouragement. Oh, you lost your job, your dog died? Well, 加油, pick yourself up and move forward, don't let bygones be bygones and get on with your life. And so, yes, indeed, 加油 can be used in that situation. It can also be used to encourage people during a competition or something. 加油, 加油. I remember hearing that quite often during the variety shows that used to be so popular on TV here in Taiwan when they would have these competitions and they were trying to do these obstacle courses and everybody was shouting 加油, 加油 to give them encouragement. We also talked about 孝顺, which we do have a translation for filial, but we just don't use that term very often. And to be honest with you, I never knew this word existed until I actually came to Taiwan.
No, I'd never seen it or heard of it before I came to Taiwan. But then after you're exposed to Chinese culture and Chinese history, you'll see this word quite often in textbooks if you're a student of China or Chinese culture at least. You'll see filial piety. You'll see those two words together a lot. But we don't use this word. We do talk about how kids should be respectful to their parents. That was really important, especially in earlier generations. My father was always very respectful to his dad, although he didn't have a very good father. I'll just tell you. He wasn't a great father. But my dad was very respectful and made it clear to us that that's what the right thing to do was to pay respect to your mom or dad. Even if they weren't the greatest parent, they did sacrifice for you. A lot of them sacrificed a lot. So we don't use filial or piety when we're talking about respecting your parents, at least in Western culture. But we do have our own social expectations for how kids should be to their parents. They're expected to listen, obey. That's getting harder to see these days if I'm watching, news reports and TV shows. I see a lot of disrespectful kids, and it makes me kind of sick. But try to be good to your parents and obey. A lot of them have a lot of pressures on them. So what can you do? Well, you need to spend some time with some of these tough phrases and come up with something that works better if you're translating, or just learn that there are some differences. I think it's the fun part of learning another language.
Okay, and the third term we're talking about today is 辛苦, which means kind of bitter, difficult. That's what it means literally. And there are multiple uses for this term, so let's discover what it means. So again, this is a term that can mean different things in different situations to Chinese people, and it roughly translates as laborious, but that doesn't tell the whole story. Okay, so you wouldn't say, gee, thank you for your help, 辛苦你, laborious you. No, we wouldn't say that. It sounds silly. It sounds stupid. It sounds dumb. And we wouldn't say it that way. But again, this term is used in lots of different situations. But roughly, more or less, it means laborious. But again, that's just for the sake of explaining the meaning. We don't really use laborious that much.
Oh, no. It's kind of a pain if it's laborious. But yeah, if something is roughly translated, roughly here just means about. It's not an exact figure. It's about this. It's approximately this. There were roughly 2,000 students in my high school when I was in high school, which was a big high school. But anyway, roughly, that's not an exact figure. So it roughly translates, as Tom said, as laborious. I think of it as hardworking, and if I hear, 辛苦你了 or 辛苦了你, I've heard both those too. It just means, oh, I feel your pain, or oh, thanks for working so hard for us. when I was in charge of the kids at church, we did lots of programs, and it was always something I heard afterwards, after we performed and the kids did a great job. They knew, took a lot of preparation. It was always, oh, 辛苦了, 辛苦你了, or 辛苦了你, I've heard too. But anyway, you're kind of expressing or showing gratitude to people for their efforts, especially when it's on your behalf or in your behalf. On your behalf is when someone does it for you and not just for themselves.
Right, so you would say that to somebody, oh, 辛苦你, thank you. That's what we would say in English. Oh, thank you, I appreciate what you're doing for me. We can express this sentiment, but we don't have a direct translation. You might use several different terms. And again, you show gratitude to people for their efforts on your behalf or for you. They're doing something for you. So you say, oh, 辛苦你, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And of course, you also use it to express sympathy for people dealing with hard times. Sympathy, of course, is having feelings for somebody when something bad has happened to them. If it's something bad like they lost a family member or they lost their job or something like that, it would be a feeling of pity or sorrow for someone who has had something bad happen to them.
Yeah, you'll often hear someone say, oh, our sympathies are with you if you've had a family death or a friend pass away. Sympathy can be pluralized like that. Oh, our sympathies go out to the family of those who lost loved ones. Or you could say I have absolutely no sympathy for thieves, people who steal stuff. So, yeah, it's a feeling of being sorry for someone who's in a bad situation. It can also be used to request a favor. So if you request something, it's kind of a polite demand or a formal demand for something. Could you please do this for me? So sometimes you have to request a favor from someone. I did last night, actually, from a colleague. Hey, could you send me that release form that you just signed today? I want to see what it looks like. Request a favor. Do something for someone else. And you might say that to them, oh, 辛苦, as a way to say thank you for doing something for you. This is definitely one hardworking expression, and isn't that the case? It's the truth, the truth. Someone who's really 辛苦 is our Chinese teacher. We're going to listen right now.
再来，我们看到第三个词语是辛苦。好，辛苦呢，我们看到这个段落的第一个句子 There are multiple uses for this term. Multiple 其实呢就是多的，不止一个 multiple 两三个以上，那我们就会说 multiple。比方说，我们知道我们常常作答的选择题是 multiple choice questions。好，再来，我们来看到下面要解释辛苦的时候，我们说大约大致上可以翻译成 laborious。可是 laborious 其实呢是在讲一件工作，不容易做，要耗费很多的力气。好，那光是这样说 laborious 辛苦，并不完全只是 laborious 的意思，所以我们才会说 that doesn't tell the whole story。因为辛苦这个字，它的意涵相当的多，所以有哪些用法呢？ It's used to show gratitude to people for their efforts on your behalf. 有一些人帮我们很多忙，那我们要表示我们的感谢的时候呢，我们就会说你辛苦了，对吧？这时候是要 show gratitude， 表示感激。那此外还有一些情况我们会说辛苦，什么样的情况啊？像比方说，有人考试考了一整天，那特别呢是考生在炎热的天气，比方说7月份的时候，有很多的学生会参加指考。那在考完一整天以后，我们可以对他们说啊，辛苦了 ，to express sympathy for people dealing with hard times。那这里我们所说的就是辛苦最常见的这两个意涵。好，那经过今天这三个词语的介绍，希望同学将来如果有机会和外国友人做语言交换的时候，他们请你解释这三个词汇，大家会更有方向，更知道要如何用英文解释给他们听，让他们知道在中文实际运用当中应该要怎么用，才不会发生错误。好，谢谢大家。
That's it, guys. Thanks for joining us. We hope you'll come back soon. For English Digest, I'm Stephanie.
I'm Tom. Goodbye.
再见。